Thank you, Harold. It's great to be here with you. I always like to start by telling a story. My dad's going to turn 90 soon, so this is dedicated to him. Now, my dad worked hard his whole life. He was an exterminator. My sister once sent him a Father's Day card that said, "Dad, we're the only family that associates the smell of DDT with love," because he'd come home smelling of all the chemicals. And he hated his job. He would wake up, Sunday nights, my brother, sister, and I would hear him pacing the floor at 2 a.m. because he hated going to work. But then he retired at age 72, and he became happy. And I get great joy from seeing him enjoy life in his older years. And he and my mother went to Florida. My brother, who's the financially successful Schumer, has a little house down there, and he bought it for him, and they go down in the winter. But they have less to do. He's getting a little too old to play golf. Many of their friends are passing on. So Florida Atlantic University offers courses. If you're a senior citizen, you can take college course for free. So every Thursday afternoon, my dad and mom drive over to Florida Atlantic University, and they enrolled in the course called humor. What is humor? Humor is some erstwhile comedian from the Catskills who never made it and gets up and tells jokes for 45 minutes. My father never went to college. He said, "Gee, college is pretty easy. I should have gone." They have a different one each week, and he always reports back with his favorite joke. So this is one that came back a little while ago. Mrs. Walters is brought before the judge. And the judge says, "You're back, Mrs. Walters." "Yes, Your Honor, I'm back." "And what did you steal this time, Mrs. Walters?" "Your Honor, I stole a can of peaches from the supermarket down the road." And he says, "Mrs. Walters, look." He's exasperated, the judge. He says, "Mrs. Walters, look, I know that you're a kleptomaniac, and I know that this is an illness, and I know you could easily afford a can of peaches. But for Lord's sake, Mrs. Walters, this is the 17th time you've been brought here for shoplifting. I have no choice. I'm going to have to sentence you for some time in jail. Now, how many peaches were in the can?" She says, "Your Honor, there were 4 peaches in the can." He says, "All right, then I have no choice. I'm going to sentence you to 4 nights in jail, 1 for each peach." He's about to bang the gavel and pronounce sentence when a gentleman in the middle of the courtroom gets up all agitated. He says, Your Honor, may it please the court, I'm her husband. She also stole a can of peas." That's dedicated to my dad. I want to thank Harold for that great introduction. He was very kind to some of the things that we have done together. But I got to tell you, your leadership in the person of Harold and your gang and Peter, my friend from New York who graduated to the International, you're great. When we sit around and figure out who's going to get it and get it quick, when we have an emergency and we need help, the first person we call on is Harold Schaitberger. He is smart, he is focused, he is no BS, and that is why the Democratic leadership in the Senate, led by Harry Reid, of which I'm proud to be part, and you guys have and gals have such a close, strong relationship. And one of the main reasons that we were able to take back the Senate and keep it is because of the International Association of Firefighters and Harold Schaitberger and your leadership. So thank you for the great job you've done. And I so appreciate what you do. You are like our soldiers. Like our soldiers, you serve your community and risk your lives to keep us safe. That's what you do. And I know what it's like. I was raised next door to a New York City firefighter. His name was Noble, Peter Noble. And my dad was off killing roaches and rats. And so Mrs. Noble raised us. And I remember the times when Mr. Noble, of course, was at the firehouse for nights on end. And she'd turn on the radio and there was a fire somewhere and she'd wonder about the safety of her husband. So I know what you go through, and I know what you do, and I know how you serve us. And I cannot thank you enough for the great job that you do. You are incredibly fine people. I love our firefighters in New York just because they have such strength of character and teamwork and camaraderie. All the great American values are practiced in the firehouse. And so I am grateful to you, and I think every American is grateful to you as well, or at least should be, and most certainly are. What I want to do is go over a few issues that are of concern to us. And by the way, this is my first time here. Harold never invited me. But after I ran the inauguration, he figured if I could introduce Kelly Clarkson and Beyonce, I can introduce him as well. But it's great to be here. The first issue is probably the most important to you. There's all sorts of talk about tax reform. And the idea is closing some of these tax loopholes that shouldn't exist. But people mix up. There are things in the tax code that were put there for a purpose and benefit middle-class people. And then there are things in the tax code that one wealthy person or well-connected person lobbied for, and it's called a rifle shot. It affects just one person or a small group of people or one company. And we have to understand the difference between the two. The mortgage deduction is not a tax loophole. It helps people own homes. The charitable deduction is not a tax loophole. It helps encourage people to give to those who need help, whether it's your church or, your veterans organization or your Little League or whatever. Well, one of the most important tax policies, not a loophole that we have, is that we want to encourage employers, whether they be municipalities or governments or private, we want to make sure that we encourage people to give benefits, health benefits and retirement benefits. That leads the middle class to live a decent life. It was the union movement. Before there was a union movement, America had a few rich people and a lot of poor people. And now, praise God, we have a big, broad middle class. And it was the union movement that did that. And they did it through good wages, and they did it through making sure that there was safety in the workplace. But they also did it by saying, if God forbid you got ill, you'd be taken care of. My mother-in-law was a CWA member. She got a brain tumor, very difficult to deal with, and her union benefits paid for the whole deal. She passed away, but they did a great job doing that. And so we encourage health benefits, and we encourage retirement benefits. And to start taxing these things as your income, there's a whole move in America by a greedy few, I must say, to undo the work of the last 60 years. Here's an interesting statistic that really is frightening. This last decade is the first decade that middle-class incomes declined in America since America was started. First decade. And in the city that I live, there's that beautiful lady with the torch. And that torch symbolizes to every American and to most people around the world the American dream. Well, what is the American dream? It's nothing fancy. It simply says if you work hard, the odds are very high that you'll be doing better 10 years from now than you're doing today, and the odds are higher still your kids will be doing better than you. If that torch starts to flicker, we have a different America. If we can't have a belief that our trajectory is upward, that we will do better if we work hard and keep our nose to the grindstone, and that our kids will do better than us, it's a whole different country. And if they start taxing your benefits and the benefits of millions like you, that's the beginning of the end. And yet there's a small group of people who want to do this. I'd say this, hitting you on April 15th is no way to thank you for your service. And I want to assure you that as long as I am on that finance committee, which is in charge of all this, this will not pass. We will not let this happen. Thank you. So if they want to do tax reform and say corporations shouldn't get deductions for moving jobs overseas, great. If they want to do tax reform that says tax the oil companies because they're getting all these benefits, They're multi-billion-dollar, great. Tax reform should not be on the backs of the middle class, and there's nothing that strengthens the middle class more than health and retirement benefits. Next, Zadroga. Without you guys, we wouldn't have gotten this done. And you know, I remember President Bush sent me up in a plane the day after 9/11 hit. And it was a horrible day. To go down there and see, first you smelled burnt flesh. You smelled death in the air. And as you got to the site, there were hundreds of people lined up with little signs. Have you seen my mother Mary? Have you seen my son Bill? Because nobody knew how many people were still buried in the wreckage. And our heroes, firefighters, police officers, construction workers, firefighters were at the top of the list. Without even asking, rushed into that pile to try and save those who might still be alive in the smoldering wreckage. They didn't ask a question. They didn't say, what happens if something happens to me? They did what firefighters always do, rush to danger. That's what you do. That's what you're taught to do. It's in your blood to do it. I always go to the Stephen Siller run, which now has 30,000 people. Maybe a few of you from around the country have run there. Siller was an off-duty firefighter. He heard that the Twin Towers had been hit. He went over to the firehouse. He lived near it. The trucks were gone. They were already at the site. So in his full gear, he ran all the way from his house under the tunnel, from his firehouse, under the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, which is a couple of miles long, up into the towers, and he died. And there's a run now for him, run by the Siller family, that I go to every year. Now it has 30,000 people. It's amazing, to raise money for the kids of people who were lost, 9/11. And to say that if 5 years later or 10 years later, because of the stuff that those brave folks breathed in, that they're on their own, getting all kinds of rare diseases. One of the captains of our New York Fire Department said, before 9/11, there were only 3 cases of a certain type of esophageal cancer. And after 9/11, there were 47. And some of the big shots are saying, well, that's just coincidence? Bull. And yet, we had people who said, we're not going to pay for their health care, for both the checking up on people so you might catch something before it got too bad, and then, of course, the care that they would need if, God forbid, they had a cancer or an emphysema or a type of mesothelioma or things like that. And so finally, with a lot of hard work and a lot of convincing, and some of your brave members embarrassing some of the people who were standing in the way. You remember that, Harold? We passed the Zadroga bill, and I can't tell you, as I travel throughout the New York metropolitan area, how many families and people come over and say, now there's some hope. We gave not because we wanted to get paid back or covered by anything. We gave because that's what we do. But at least we're being remembered. And so the Zadroga bill is law, but we're going to need to come back in a few years working together. The compromise that we had to pass said that it was to work out for 5 years. So we have to come back in a few years, but we will, and we will get it done. The ruling that has just happened from NIASH also is going to help pay for kids' college tuition, which is a good thing as well. So we got to keep working and working and working. Next, New York's been hit by the greatest man-made tragedy, the evil of the terrorists on 9/11, and then we were hit just last couple of months ago with Sandy by one of the greatest natural tragedies that occurred. and many of the areas that were wiped out were loaded with firefighters. Breezy Point, Rockaway, Long Beach, great communities. Wearing my green tie, and I'm going to rush out of here to meet the Irish Prime Minister. And many of those communities heavily populated with tough Irish men and women. And Sandy was devastating. People, you know, we all have, what's our biggest investment? What's our piece of the rock? Our house. And then it gets taken away by a huge flood. And then you call up the insurance company and you've diligently paid your insurance for years and they say, we don't cover flood. You should have had flood insurance. But flood insurance was not really out there for a whole lot of people. What do these folks do? Well, immediately after Sandy, to just help them get their lives in order, firefighters from around the country, once again, just like after 9/11, answered the call. And many of the firefighters who actually lived in the area, and I knew many of them, it was my old congressional district, they put their own safety aside and even what was happening with their own families and rushed to duty. And as you know, it was not just the flooding that occurred, there was huge amounts of fires. We had like an area in Breezy Point of like 110 houses all burnt to the ground. It looked like a picture of Dresden, you know, that you see in World War II, with just some of the brick chimneys standing and nothing else, because these are wooden houses. They were built a while ago. But even the firefighters who lived there, they went and did their duty, and hundreds of lives were saved in Staten Island and in Brooklyn and in Queens and in Breezy and in Rockaways and in Long Beach because of the selflessness, the dedication, the duty of you guys. And so, again, you were there. Again, we worked together to get relief for the people who lost out. Because the insurance companies and FEMA and all these people, if you've ever been in one of these tragedies, they play, remember the old Abbott and Costello? He did it. They're saying, go to him. And working together, we finally passed some good legislation. And now these folks will get the assistance to build back their homes. And I believe these communities, which are populated by huge numbers of firefighters and other public safety officers, will be back bigger and stronger and better than ever, just as New York came back after 9/11. So we thank you for that. And finally, last but not least on our agenda this year is safe chemicals. As you know, my good friend from across the Hudson River, Frank Lautenberg, sponsored the Safe Chemicals Act. I've co-sponsored it. Now, you know, some say, well, this makes cookware safer or the hair dye safer. But it will cut back on using chemicals that can turn an electrical fire into a block-wide disaster. If we can make the upholstery and the carpeting and everything that goes into new homes and buildings with safe chemicals, we can save the lives of some of your fellow firefighters and so many more of the citizens you represent. The chemicals that are now in this stuff pose an unreasonable risk to public health, to safety, to firefighter safety and citizen safety. And obviously, there's going to be big resistance from the chemical industry to get this passed. But if we do what we did with Zadroga, and we do what we did with Sandy, and just bring to light to the public what's going on here, then we will win this fight as well. And I promise you we will work together with the new Secretary of Labor, who I know you've supported. I like it. Anyone here from Buffalo? He's from Buffalo, New York. Great town. And we will work with him on this and other issues to make it happen. In conclusion, I want to say this to Harold and to Tom Miller, to my good friend Peter Gorman, to Jim Lee, and to all of you. You represent the best of America as far as I'm concerned. And all too often you're busy doing your jobs and raising your families, dealing with the ups and downs of life that God visits on every one of us, And so, oftentimes, the greatness of what you do gets ignored by governments at all levels. The fact that you are here and representing the men and women in your units or under your commands is so important, because just seeing you when you visit the halls of Congress, when you let us know, when you visit us in our offices, reminds us of how, like our soldiers, you serve your community and risk your lives for our safety. It's something no American should forget. It's something no Congress member, Democrat or Republicans, should forget. And it's something I promise you I will never forget. Thank you and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Alex.